Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Carson here with us, Startup Grind. There's so many amazing things that people could say about you. You not only donate your time, you tell your story, you mentor, you educate. I went into your office the other day and sure enough there he was, heads down coding with 2 monitors standing. And what does he do? He lifts up his head and goes, hey, which was really cool. But I think I normally have some questions that I kind of go through because I think it's really wonderful to really get to know the people here in Minneapolis that are successful and the things that they have done, but not just recently. Who are they and where have they come from and who was the person or people that helped him or her be who they are today? Before I start asking those questions, I want to know what you would have said to yourself today, to that person that was there with the beard and the younger. I mean, what advice? It was awesome. It was raw. It was great because you have no idea then where you are today. What advice would you have given that young man there?
So, when I was in college at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, I had this design professor. So my degree is a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in graphic design. But I had this design professor, and her name was Li Ying Bao, and she was this very, very tiny woman. And she had really the highest standard, and of all the design professors that I had, she was by far had the largest influence on me. And I would say that we'd go into these critiques, and you'd have your work up on the wall, and all your classmates are be taking a look at it, and you'd go through this critique and think about the things that you can do differently to maybe make that design better, things that you're going to go back and work on. And she would close out every critique with this saying, and she'd look at the work and she'd look at you and she'd say, keep going. And so after countless critiques, that's just was just hammered in my mind. And now looking back at it, through everything that we've gone through over the last decade, it becomes clear that rings so true. It's never easy. But to have that in the back of your mind where you're just saying, keep going.
Keep going. So you should probably frame that and put it somewhere in your office.
It's framed in my mind.
So she obviously molded you to continue going forward, but let's go back even further. So when you were a young boy, we know where you went to college. Mm-hmm. Okay, where did you grow up? And was there someone in your life when you were a young boy who really made you think differently or realize that you're maybe different, where you don't want to follow the same path, that you've got to be more of a creative and you're going to go over here? Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about yourself when you were a young boy and how old were you when you figured that out?
So I grew up in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. Those of you Minnesotans who don't know where that is, it's pretty much exact center of the state. Small town, about 18,000 people. It's a paper mill type of town. So I think there were 2 influences in my life early on. The first being my dad. So both my parents are teachers. My dad was an 8th grade science teacher. My mom was a grade school learning disabilities teacher. And so my dad, being a science teacher, he would have all these great experiments that he was doing for his students, and he'd bring stuff home. So whether it was fire, here's a Bunsen burner, here's some stuff we can burn, and it changes all sorts of colors, or whether it was dry ice and liquid nitrogen. I mean, that was kind of our kitchen table. And he was all about experimenting. So it's you try this and you see what happens and you learn from that and you kind of, you modify it and you keep going. And he was very entrepreneurial as well. As a teacher, he would, he'd have the summers off and he had ideas and he would pursue those. And so I got to kind of see how that experimentation and building out of ideas really worked over time. And then the second person was my uncle, and he was a designer and had made a great career out of being creative. And so when I kind of had that bug in junior high and in high school, instead of my parents saying, no, you should do something where you can actually make a living, don't go into art and design, they were very encouraging to that. So when I told them I want to go to college for design, they backed me up 100%. And I think that was really crucial as well. I had friends in high school that were in a lot of my photography or design classes or other art classes who were discouraged by their parents and were kind of forced down a different route, all in the name of, a job that you can make a living at some point in the future. So, that's it, both of those.
So I think right there that kind of, I know it shares with me the importance of when someone has an idea or they want to be creative, support it, because it may grow into something even more amazing than it could have ever been. So obviously having that support.
Yeah, and I think it's the most telling thing, my parents, gosh, my dad is incredible. So when we first were starting this business, and we kind of mentioned it in the video, we started out as a custom design shop, and in college, we were, on these old computers and stuff. So the first thing we needed is a new computer to actually be able to run Photoshop and Illustrator and all these design apps. And so I went to my dad, like my sophomore year of college, and I said, hey Dad, I'm going to go take out a student loan, and that's not going to pay tuition. I'm actually going to buy a computer with that, and I need you to co-sign for this loan. And he was like, absolutely, I'm happy to do that. And at the time I thought it was cool, but looking back on it, I realized how awesome that was for him to say, all right, I'm going to put my name on this, and I know that it's not going to pay tuition, it's going to this piece of hardware. And that was so cool.
So is he glad that he did that today?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So when you're talking about your dad, you're talking about technology and design, the next question is, what inspires you? I mean, what just really, everything kind of goes away and you all of a sudden see this light that just really inspires you to do what? I mean, what is it?
So I get most inspired when I'm completely off the grid. And I think there's a lot of people that kind of share this as well, but like being forced away from technology, especially, you have this watch that just taps you when something happens, or your phone is just always there. The times where I feel most inspired, I'm nowhere near that technology, and it's giving my mind, I think, time to just, decipher, the things that are going on, and really just dig into, again, as the video stated, the really tough problems that we're trying to solve. I feel like being distracted all over the place makes it just harder to really dig into what's important and essential and really get to the next great idea.
Okay, so the question I have for you is, do you know what that next great idea is?
I don't think you know it until you're there.
Okay, and then after you get there, then what?
Keep going.
Keep going. I was searching for that, so good job, good job. So you have an interesting industry. Everyone is creating new widgets and everyone's creating new software, okay? But when you started creating your software, a lot of the apps and things were not necessarily around. So my question to you is, what is your industry doing to help you stay ahead?
What is the industry doing to stay
What
ahead?
is, yeah, because obviously they're doing something in order for your mind to think, okay, these guys are doing this, I need to go further. I need
Sure.
to think again. So what, is there anything in your industry? What are they saying? What are they doing? What's hot right now in your industry?
Yeah. So it's been a very fascinating industry to be a part of. So this world of sports and technology, and then we kind of layered in this other aspect which is youth sports. And I think early on, when we told people that we were building a software company focused on youth sports, people would just say, oh, that's really cute, and we get that, oh yeah, okay, it's like this little hobby business that you have around youth sports. And the more that we peeled the onion back, it was like, wow, this market potential is absolutely massive. There's 50 million kids that are participating in organized youth sports just here in the United States, and sports are universal. So the market size is just huge. And you think about the way that youth sports is like this cornerstone to a lot of families' lives. It's a way that they make their friends, they interact within this community, they travel together. So when we started digging into that community and the things that drove it, that's what kind of spurred our innovation initially, saying, all right, we don't need to recreate the wheel here. Let's just look at how this community interacts, and let's build this functionality that just helps that. So, it wasn't overly genius or anything. It was just, here's a market. Let's see what we can do to make that better. But as we look at innovation going forward, now we're looking at kind of this foundation that we built, and we have this idea that goes farther than just a youth sports organization. And now it goes to how can we make a tangible impact in this country in a generation to increase participation in youth sports. And that was always kind of this underlying theme as we built the business, but now we're at a point where we have the resources, and that's not all that far off. And so now it's thinking, okay, if there are 50 million people participating this year, how can we lift that number so that millions and more kids are having that experience that helps shape their lives and give them, great life lessons and just this positive lifestyle.
So when you're talking about lifestyle, obviously Minneapolis, Minnesota, we have a lifestyle. And so why are you here in Minneapolis instead of Wisconsin, or why are you here? Why Minneapolis? Why Minnesota?
So initially, hockey.
Yeah.
So when we first started, it was, who's going to buy this initial product? And we thought, well, we have a couple connections in this world of youth hockey. Both Justin and I played growing up. Justin had a great relationship with his high school hockey coach, Ed Wiesel, down in Shakopee. And so when we looked at how are we going to prove this model, or who would actually buy this, we gave Ed a call and said, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Would you guys buy this initial, what was Puck Systems at the time, website? And Ed convinced the board to do so. And so we went live with that Shakopee Youth Hockey website, and a couple weeks later, Prior Lake Savage gave us a call, said we saw that, and saw that website in Shakopee. We love a website like that for our organization, which was huge. We were in college at the time, and here was a real adult willing to give us real money for something we built. That's you're high-fiving, right? They weren't coerced into it. They were buying it on their own free will. And so that was when we were back in Eau Claire, and we're like, if we want to be in this market, we have to move to the Twin Cities. And so packed up a U-Haul and rented 1,000 square feet in northeast Minneapolis and moved a couple of nasty desks and chairs, and there we were in the Twin Cities.
So when you were in the Twin Cities, how many people did you have with you when you started there, and what was your thought when you walked in that door? After you signed the lease,
Yeah.
what was your thought?
So it was just Justin and myself at that point.
Okay.
And we've had this tradition.
1,000? How many square feet?
1,000 square feet.
Okay.
So we've had this tradition of building out old warehouses. It started in Eau Claire. When we started there, nobody would take us seriously when we were in the dorms. And so the first order of business was to rent a space. And so we rented this horrible space in the old Uniroyal tire factory that is mentioned in the video there. And it was actually like a step down from our dorm room. It was brutal, but we built it out. It's like, all right, borrow some of your dad's tools and kind of bribe your friends with pizza and beer to come help you out. And so we built that space out. And so when we moved to the Twin Cities, it was just more of the same. It was, what's the cheapest place, that's in decent proximity, and okay, this is horrible, and what can we do to build it out? And again, you get the saws out and build a platform, put up a wall, do some drywall, and all right, kind of hang your shingle and get down to business. So that was the original space. It was on Kennedy Street in Northeast.
Wow. So it just started out the two of you.
Mhm.
At what point did you realize you needed to hire a couple of people? And so there's that question.
Yeah.
But then also there is that tipping point where you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
Yeah.
We're getting successful. So there's two-part question.
Yes. So when we started out, we were fortunate that we had this design business on the side. And so that allowed us to bootstrap the sports tech experiment. And we would do client work, and we use that money and just push it straight into the business and kind of buy ourselves enough time to prove out this sports tech thing. So when it came to a point where we realized, all right, there's enough income where we can actually start to hand off these custom design clients to other agencies and focus 100% of our time over here. I mean, that was a huge, huge turning point for
Was
us.
that hard to let go?
No, it wasn't. I think, not at all. I think very early on, that transition was inevitable. I think that, we did great work. I mean, we were doing everything from logo design to website design. We even shot some 30-second video or commercials, 30-second commercials for local businesses. It's really anything creative you need, we can do that for you.
Can you do it now? We need one.
I could
We're
maybe
done
do
on.
that.
I think that would be cool.
We'll see, maybe nights and weekends. And so we were able to bootstrap that, and when we got to the point where that was paying the bills, then it was really full speed ahead, and it was kind of this step function where, okay, we have enough revenue, or maybe we could hire somebody. What do we need here to take us to the next level? And we'd make that hire, and then we'd see, where we were trending, and I think we have enough coming in now to where we can sustain another hire. And so that was kind of the cycle that we went through. But before that, I think it's important to note it was Justin and myself, and then we brought on two other equity partners, Mike Lewis and Greg Glasgow. So Michael Lewis was the old guy of the crew. He was like 7 years older than the rest of us, fresh out of college. And Mike's story is awesome. So he was out in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, and he was the lead architect for a company called Preview Travel. And so he was out there for the boom and the bust, and Preview Travel became Travelocity. You guys have heard of it, so he was out there for that. And after the dot-com bubble burst, he took off and he lived in Thailand for 3 years in a hut on the beach, and just went fishing. He was completely out of the tech game. And so he was done with that adventure and flew back to the Twin Cities. His parents live in Hastings, and he got off of the plane and he picked up a City Pages, and there was an ad in there for a developer for a sports tech company. And so he walked through our door for that interview. It was Justin and myself sitting there at the table in our office, and he walks through the door, and he's this big guy, big beard, very, very loud and social, and he walks through the door, and who the heck is this guy? And we totally hit it off with him. I mean, he's great. And so he joined the team as an equity partner, and then Greg Glasgow joined shortly after. And Greg was someone that Justin and I knew from Eau Claire. He is like a classic tech guy and tinker. He has this room in his house called the ROT, as his girlfriend calls it. It's the room of technology. It's pretty much every iPhone, and he has probably a dozen laptops and a vinyl cutter and a drone. He is obsessed with technology. He is just a genius when it comes to putting these different systems together. And he's very technical, and he can code as well. So that was our team out of the gate, and it was the four of us. And when I think back on that, I think a big reason for our success is we had a team that could take an idea from concept through completion to make it a reality. We didn't have to lean on any third party or wait for someone else to get to it on their schedule. It was, we would jam out an idea, and an overnighter later, there it was, living and breathing. And so we were able to iterate very, very quickly.
Very cool. Does anyone have any questions at all for Carson? I'd like to open it up for a couple of questions. And you just have to speak really loudly because we're videoing it. I want to make sure we get your question.
So, starting out with the two equity partners you had, how did you decide, who was going to be an employee versus who was going to be an equity partner at the company?
Sure. So initially, with Justin and myself, it was just 50-50. I mean, we were in this design business together, and the sports tech side of things was just, another company that the two of us were founding. And so that was easy. And then for the other guys, for Mike and Greg, as we brought them on as equity partners as well, there was no paycheck waiting for them at that point. We had no promise of a weekly paycheck or benefits or benefits at that point. It was just, here's an idea, here's a market that we believe in, and here's a vision, and if you're bought in, you put your skin on the line and, come along for the ride. So, I mean, it was the four of us, and if you missed a paycheck at that point, it really didn't matter. But I think one of the scariest decisions was just saying, all right, now we're going to hire somebody. Because at that point, okay, now you need to make payroll. You need to figure out what this benefit stuff is. And what does it mean to have an employee? That was just so foreign to us. And so at that point, it was still like a smaller equity component. I think our first 100 employees were granted options. And so we've used that as a vehicle to reward those that have been with us for a long period of time. But, at that point, it was a salary promise as well. We needed to be sure that we were at a point where our revenue growth trends, we could sustain those over a couple months, and we were confident in saying, hey, we want to bring you on, and there's going to be a paycheck there waiting for you.
What decision kept you up at night, and how did you work through it?
Oh,
Which decision?
Right.
The most ones that kept you up the most.
So I think at every stage of the business, there's going to be different things that consume your attention, and that you just have to fight through. If I think back to early on, there's some times where we were experimenting, and one of those experiments was our online registration product. And so out of the gate, we had a content management system that was sport specific, so content and statistics and standings and schedules. And then our secondary product was online registration, so the ability for a parent to sign their child up to play sports, an organization can collect the information they need, and then a parent can pay for that. But with that payment processing component, which was so desperately needed by these organizations, there comes a lot of responsibility as well. And, you don't want to be the company that messes that up, I can just see the headlines now. That's not a good story. And so when we started seeing success around that online registration product, and all of a sudden there are more funds running through that system than we were necessarily planning for, and we saw that ramp up incredibly fast, it was like, okay, now what are we missing? What are the pieces that we absolutely have to nail? We didn't have the luxury of figuring those out over time. We just had to go out and figure it out now. So that was early on one of those things where this is awesome, but we have no idea what we're doing.
You had a question?
Okay, so your story sounds pretty sane and smooth, other than like my entrepreneur journey. When was there a time where you doubted yourself or thought you might give up, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, there's been a lot of times, and as an entrepreneur, you kind of play this mind game, and it's a total roller coaster. There's days where it's like, this is awesome, and other days where you're like, I'm going to go do something else. And that, I think, is just, that's part of it. And I don't know if I can remember like one specific time, but I can tell you that having like a co-founder that you can go through that together has been just a lifesaver. To have someone that you trust, someone that you get along with, all like those attributes specifically have been huge for Justin and myself, and then Greg and Mike as they came on board. Because you could be having a day where, you know, you're just totally down, and you have someone there to just pull you up. And I feel like going through that journey without a co-founder would have been much more difficult. And I'm just, you know, super blessed to have had, you know, a number of great people that have been part of that journey from day one.
So early on, would you consider raising money or sort of go organically almost?
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, the question is, did we consider raising money initially, or was growing organic always part of the plan? Initially, growing organically was something that we all believed in because we wanted to have kind of proof, or a proof of concept. And what we found is that if you have that proof of concept, it makes fundraising, if you go that route, so much easier. So for us, the first time that we raised money was in 2008. Awesome time to raise money. It's like the worst economy in 30 years. And there's no way we could have raised unless we had that proof of concept. And at that point, we were actually cash flow positive. You know, we had organically grown to 8 people, including the 4 partners or founders, and 4 employees. And we had about 250 organizations on the platform at that point in time. So to go out to an investor and do that pitch, okay, here's our deck, here's what we say we're going to do. Oh, and by the way, here's a product that you can interact with, and 250 organizations are already bought in. Oh, and by the way, we're cash flow positive. I mean, if you're looking for a great multiple and a great situation where you're not giving up a ton of equity, that's a place to be. And so with that initial success, raising about $650,000 from Twin Cities Angels, they had let our angel round. We kept that mentality when we went out and raised the next rounds that we did. So, I mean, it was a bunch of everything. That's the messy part of it, is we had a vision for what we thought it could be, and at the same time, there was this great market feedback and conversations that we were having with our customers. And the thing that I love about that initial startup phase is you are absolutely forced to have conversations with your customers. And over our growth trajectory, that's become more and more challenging. But I look back to those early days, and between Greg and Mike and myself, we were the support line. Phone would ring, and whoever could actually go over and pick it up, you were taking that support call, and you could feel that pain when you're having that conversation. And you can bring those real world stories back as you evolve your product, and I feel like that just lends itself to rapid iteration that is perfectly in line with the market. And that's something that I think a lot of startups they take that for granted. But I mean, unless you try and preserve that, it just gets more and more difficult over time. I look at where we're at today. We have this incredible support team, and they are interacting with our customers and helping them make the best of our product. And that team is just amazing. But then we have a product management group, and we have a user experience group and an engineering group. And somehow you have to facilitate that conversation. And unless you're really mindful of that, you lose that empathy along the way, because it's not that direct tie to the customer that you can't avoid when you're first starting out.
I know you mentioned your first client was the hockey team down in Prior Lake? Shakopee?
Yeah.
At what point did you know your product was ready to market and ready to test out with the pond? I mean, what did it take to get to that point? And was there any fear there? Was there, are we ready? Are we really ready?
Yeah. So we were ready to market after that first one, man. It was like, all right, they're using this thing, and they have great things to say about it. And after that second one came on board, it was just full speed ahead. And we had no money for marketing at that point in time. And so we went total guerrilla marketing style on it. We put together a couple $100 and we made these posters. And so took a pair of Justin skates, We threaded them with Ethernet cable, and this was the Puck Systems product at the time, and the tagline was your Hockey Association website solution. And it's 11 by 17 posters. We thought they were awesome at the time. And we're like, all right, how are we going to get these in front of people? So Justin and I drove around the metro, and we would outfit these posters in the car with double-sided tape. And you'd run into the arena and you'd just slap them everywhere. Like we were by the concession stand, go into the men's bathroom, put them on the walls. We'd go into the stalls, put them on the back of the stalls. You put 15, 20 posters in an arena and you get the heck out of there. Whether they'd see you do that or whether you were chased, mission accomplished. And so we did that for a couple weekends, and this was right before the Let's Play Hockey Expo in St. Paul. So you guys know high school hockey is a big deal here. During the high school hockey tournament, there's this expo, everything hockey. So all these parents are taking their kids there to watch the state hockey games, and they go walk through the expo, between games or whatever. And so we had purchased this small little booth, and we were going to show people demos of the product. And this is a few weeks after we'd gone poster slapping, and so we're standing there talking to people, and we had a couple dozen people come up to us and be like, "Puck Systems, I've seen you guys everywhere." And so that was,
You're like a rock band.
yeah, exactly. And so, that was just a great lesson where, we could have made an excuse and said, "Hey, we don't have money to do any advertising, we're just going to feel sorry for ourselves." But it was, okay, what is something that we can do with this little money we have? And you just go out and you make it happen, and, you hope that it turns out all right. And, it did. We landed, another half dozen customers just because of the conversations that we were having at that expo. And that kind of brand recognition, I think that played in our favor as well.
That's great. So, all the lessons that you've learned, what type of advice would you give an entrepreneur that is just starting out?
Yeah. Oh, man. It's really, really hard. It's really hard. And I would say if there's one thing that you can do, so if you have like a significant other, like really appreciate what they're giving up. So my wife Amanda, she's a nurse, and we've been together since college. But along this entire journey, like the sacrifices that she has made for me to do this, and pour hours and time and to put up with that is massive, and if you can recognize that as an entrepreneur and really show that appreciation to the people that are close to you, that's going to encourage them. Let them know that they're as much a part of it as you are for like going on this journey, because they're the people who are going to pick up the pieces so many times when when things are down or schedules get crazy or you're pulling an all-nighter. And if you have them aligned with you and there to support you, then there's a better chance that you're going to make it to the other side.
So I agree with that. Does anyone else have any other questions? Yes.
Well, congratulations on NBC Sports, the acquisition. My question to you is, what was the darkest time? What was the product wasn't meeting your expectations that particular day? You were growing. What was the toughest time for you?
Yeah.
You're very optimistic too. And I know there's something in it.
Yeah, and so there's probably a couple things that have been challenging. I don't feel like there's ever been like this dark time, but it's it's challenges that you just have to get your head around and kind of push through them. And a couple things that for me personally have been challenges, and one of those kind of coming from this design perspective and being very driven, and that's just my worldview, to understand when things are like good enough to ship, right, and to make those sacrifices. And it's kind of set your ego aside and understand what you're actually trying to accomplish, regardless of what it is that you like hold as your dog, and like to get through that. And there have been many times over the years where I've probably held too tight to that design consideration, when it would have been maybe better just to ship something and to get it out the door. And then the conversations and kind of the internal struggles in that as well, I think those have been a challenge for me personally. And then maybe the other piece of it, being just completely real, is how you interact with your co-founders. And naturally there's going to be people that play different roles. You can compare it to a rock band or to a sports team. And there's got to be a front man in each of those scenarios. And so the role that I've played over the years has been more of that supporting role, where Justin, with his sales hat on, in the way that his mind is just totally tuned into the business, has been that natural CEO. And so there's times in that scenario, and for those people who are co-founders, you will like feel this to your core, where you say, all right, I'm going to be second, and I'm not going to be that front man, and I'm going to support what this business needs, and whatever it takes, And so it's like, all right, this is the role that I play to better this business. And I don't think that comes naturally to anyone. But to recognize that and to appreciate the roles that everyone plays, and to do that with an attitude that's for the betterment of this vision that you're building towards. For me, I think that's been just a lesson over many years to come to that realization and appreciation for those roles.
Hi Carson, I want to know more about you coming up with the idea and knowing that it was right and you're going to act on it and make it a business with Justin.
Yeah, so when we were doing custom design, it was one of those things where you do a project and you'd hand it off to your customer, and they'd go and do their thing with it and come back a few months later and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what they did to this thing, And so early on, when we were kind of cycling on these ideas, it was, what can we build that's ours? And I think that's something as a maker and a creative, to say, I want to own something, not just a business, but like refine this product over time, make it better and better and better. So that was kind of this underlying idea. And then we're like, all right, so what are we going to build? And then it was naturally, well, what do we know? And both he and I played every sport imaginable growing up. We, from baseball to basketball, soccer, hockey, you name it. And, we played sports growing up. Both of us had done some coaching and some officiating, and we had parents who were those volunteers, who were on the boards of soccer associations, hockey associations. And so, like, all right, we know this, and we think that we can bring this professional level of design and technology, and through scale actually make it accessible. Because that's the other thing. Sports organizations, especially, you rewind 8 or 9 years, it's not like they had this massive line item for technology. You had to make it so that it was just a no-brainer for them. And so I think it was all those things kind of coming together, and this emerging trend of web apps as well, where the thought of delivering software online and this software as a service model was beginning to pick up speed. And so it was just a translation of all these things that we saw all wrapped up into a concept where we thought we could make it better.
So you were pretty young when you started. I'm curious, you obviously look young now, but I'm curious, who did you go to mentor from, knowing, what percentage to give equity partners? And, you said you gave equity to the first 100 employees or whatever. So who did you mentor with? Who was your mentor?
So there were many, many people, and I mean that's one thing that I'm so fortunate that we made the move to the Twin Cities. I think that in college we had great professors, but at that time, you know, there wasn't any startup scene in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and so making the move over here was, I feel like, just the right time where that trend was beginning. I remember going to some of the first mini demo events in, like, I don't know, second or third mini bar, and it was, you know, this community that was starting to come together around the tech space, and everywhere that we went and asked questions, people were happy to either, you know, give us their candid advice or point us in the right direction. And I feel like we were so fortunate to be introduced to countless people that helped us along the way. And even in this latest chapter, I mean, we have an incredible executive team. You know, you look at like this NBC Sports event, and you know, we have executives that have been through things like this in the past. We had a seasoned board who had been through things like this in the past. We had a great legal team, and so we could lean on everyone around us to really kind of guide us the right path. We've been very, very fortunate.
So it comes down to networking. Surround yourself with people that have gone through it before, and if they haven't, they may know of someone that they can introduce you to. And I think that's the reason why, and we have one more question, so definitely would like to hear your question, and I'll continue. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
So, on the decision making front, so as entrepreneurs and people who are developing startups, you always sort of struggle through, like, how do you make decisions, right? And my question is, how do you make decisions, and has that changed over time? For example, how much of your decision making is sort of based on instinct, and how much is it based on sort of, you know, rational facts and figures and data?
Yeah.
How much is it just a feeling? This is what I think maybe.
Yeah. That's so hard to quantify. Holy cow. I think it depends on the decision. I think if there's things that you know, I think it's fairly easy to make that decision. And it kind of goes back to the whole, like, co-founder, finding people that you absolutely trust, that you can maybe verbalize those things. I mean, I've found it so beneficial to be able to just talk my mind in front of someone else who you trust, or you know you have alignment towards the business. And then once you get it out there, you know, to be able to really cycle on those ideas and get to a place where you know it's the truth. That's been so beneficial to us. And to even make yourself vulnerable in those conversations where you're saying, all right, maybe I think this, but maybe I'm wrong. You know, the minute that you can say that maybe I'm wrong within a conversation with somebody else, now you just open the door to actually get to the best answer, right? It's not something that you're necessarily defending in your decision. And you've kind of softened that to the other people around you. It's like, all right, let's give ourselves the space to explore this idea and define and to get to the place where we know that it is the best idea.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, we'll take a couple more.
So I'm just wondering about when you grew into a little bit of a larger company, how you and your co-founders worked together to provide transparency for your employees.
Yeah, transparency. So that's been huge for us. So we have a couple of traditions that we have that encourage that transparency. So one of them is, we call it Donut Day. And it started when Mike Lewis, when it was the four of us. So he would go out every Wednesday night to Maze Lax in northeast Minneapolis with a bunch of his friends. And Thursday mornings he might be a little bit hungover, He'd stop at Sarah Jane's Bakery in Northeast there, and he'd bring this little bag of donuts, 4 donuts. He'd bring those into the office, and like, all right, donuts, and we naturally, the 4 of us would like sit around and just kind of take a few minutes and catch up about everything that was going on. And so we made a couple of hires, and Mike kept bringing donuts every Thursday morning, you know, and so now there's 8 of us, and so we get together, and then there were 20 of us, and we got together in the lounge, and now Mike's asking if he can expense the donuts. And so, you know, we're to this point now where there's almost 300 people, and we walk out of Sarah Jane's Bakery every Thursday morning with 5 massive boxes of donuts. And one Thursday every month we have this all hands meeting. And so every Thursday there's donuts, so people are hanging out doing that thing. But once a month we have a program where there's updates across the organization. So that can be maybe some, you know, big sales wins, or this great new product enhancement that went out the door, or a huge success by our enterprise team. And it always includes financial update. So Dan Kinsella, our CFO, gets up in front. We have the plan. Everybody knows the plan for the year. And hey, here's where we were last month based on our plan. And here are the reasons why, and here are some trends. And so we, you know, breaks that down, and everybody in the entire company is there to see that. And I mean, ultimately, you know, there's the scorecard. How are you keeping score? How are you doing? What are the things that we need to, you know, really focus on? So, I mean, that's just one tradition, but it's been huge for transparency, where people know that, you know, the second Thursday of every month, you're going to get that update. You understand what it is, and you have context then around what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Another thing for transparency, in all of our conference rooms, they're all just big glass walls. So, you know, there's, you know, nothing happens behind closed doors. You know, you see the people that are having a conversation. There's the whiteboard. Nothing is hidden. Not that it, you know, would need to be, but just that feeling of, you know, here it is, and you're part of it. And, you know, we want you to understand what's going on with the organization, and to, you know, help be a big part of pushing that forward.
Sir, you had a question back there?
Sure. I guess you were going into networking, I guess, at one point, just a few minutes ago. But so as you grow, you get into the programs around, you know, you have accelerators, then you took angel funding. So can you describe, you know, for going into that, how do we utilize it the best, or how do we choose our network, or they choose us? Like, you know, can you help me with that part?
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say don't network blindly, right? Don't network and think that something great is going to happen because of it. It might, but it might not. I mean, you should always know exactly, you know, what you need from the community. Not that you have to go out and force that, but if the conversation heads that way, you need to be ready to, you know, take it and run with it. You know, if you know that one thing you need help with is around like a business plan or an investor deck, or, you know, whatever it is that's kind of top of mind, like go into an opportunity like this and, you know, say to yourself, all right, by the time this is over, I want to have a lead to get there, you know, and so then naturally that's going to come up in conversation. Whereas if you didn't necessarily have that in mind, you might talk to somebody who knows the answer and you forgot to mention it, and well, you just missed that opportunity. But if you say, you know, within your conversation, you're like, yeah, you know, we're really hoping to put together an investor deck, and that comes up in a couple conversations, and all of a sudden there's someone who's like, hey, you know, we've just been through that, or we know somebody who successfully raised funds. Let me connect you with them, and maybe they'd be willing to talk to you about what they're doing. You know, now all of a sudden that time that you've invested is paid off with something that is timely to your business.
And that does tie into networking. I think that it is an amazing opportunity to be able to come into a room and stretch yourself, feel uncomfortable, walk up to somebody, tell them who you are and why are you here. They'll ask you the same question. Next thing you know, you have a dialogue going on. And it's just the more people, the more involvement that you get, such as a startup grind. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just picked up the phone or I emailed you and asked you, would you? I've never met you before. But you said, sure, not a problem. So I think all of us have learned something in this room that we didn't know necessarily before about Carson, or this location, or someone that you may have met this evening. And I just think that it is really important, if you want to be successful, you need to be uncomfortable and you need to network as much as possible, because there is an opportunity that you may meet your co-founder. And like I've continued to say, or not say, I've continued to hear you say tonight, as well in this video, was be mindful. And I think that is just really something that some people sometimes forget, that you need to be mindful of the people that you meet. You need to listen to what they have to say. And if you don't remember after you walked out, you'll see them again and you'll continue the conversation. But also take notes, write things down, so then when you do have opportunities, you can be reminded. So when I see them, I'm going to make sure I ask them about how to make, an investor's deck or whatever it may be at that time. So, does anyone else have any more questions? Okay, we'll take two more. I want to be mindful for everyone's time. Go ahead.
So, I took a class, entrepreneurship class, and they said 50-50 partnerships always fail. That was a big piece of advice to me. Yeah. And it didn't for you. And, so the question really is like, did you guys have to just organically go through the process of everything, and did it just sort of work because of the trust and the friendship? Or did you have to start, writing, putting things in writing and organizing stuff so that you could get it out the line when it came to like who makes decisions and
Sure.
all that?
Great question. So I think you need to document things up front as far as the expectations of your partnership. And I mean, Justin and I did that as well in that contract, or that evolved over time when we added, Greg and Mike as well. So it was, here are the expectations, here's ownership. On the ownership side of things, I think it's smart to think about vesting as well. You want somebody that's in there for the long haul. So let's say it's 50-50. All right, well then put something in place where that ownership percentage doesn't vest until 18 months or 24 months later, right? You have equal ownership, but at that point you're guaranteeing a commitment by those two founders to be part of that business and push it forward for an extended period of time. And if they don't, we'll then have something in place that dictates what happens to those shares in that scenario. I think the more that you can spell out initially to set the expectations, then everybody's aligned and you don't get into a crazy misunderstanding that completely tears a business apart. And so, just be super diligent about documenting that up front when you're all on the same page. I think it works best with trust, though. If you're considering starting a business with someone, you better be able to say to yourself, I absolutely trust this person. Like, if there's any doubt in your mind, I'd be very weary of that. Probably pull off.
That's where your gut comes in.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, the decision ultimately impacts companies greatly. Is there anything looking back that's a little moment or decision that you're particularly proud of that affected the trajectory of the company? And conversely, looking back, is there something you can do differently to have a chance?
Ooh, a couple good ones. Yeah, so first, what decision made a huge impact for us in a positive way and a negative way after that? So early on, when we were, I think, about 18 people, we got together, the entire company, in our lounge, and we established core values. And so when you're a small company, I think that your values, you kind of all know them because you're interacting so closely, and it's just the way that you do business. But we got together and we whiteboarded, okay, what are the things that make SportsEngine unique? And jotted all that stuff down. We had this great dialogue about it, and we took those and we distilled that down into 6 core values. And every hire that we have made, we've run through that filter. Decisions that we make, we run through that filter. And it has been this tool that just kind of keeps on giving back. You know, people that are interested in coming to work for us, they see that and they understand what we stand for initially, and they can kind of, if that's not them, well, that's fine. You know, they don't have to be a part of our organization, but if it is, those are people that we desperately want to hire. And they've been great tools that empower new employees as well. Being a relatively flat organization, you know, like any startup, you're hiring people that you hope they just go out and make things happen. You're not necessarily asking for permission all the time, but they're just going and making things happen. And if you have a set of core values that you hold to as an organization, then they're going to be able to make those decisions. And if they align with your core values, then they're doing the right thing, and they can feel comfortable about that. And it just allows people to work at a faster speed. So that was huge for us. Establishing those is one of the best things that we ever did. Something that we do over again. I think probably focus. Because as you have success, there's all sorts of opportunity. So we went down this path fairly early on where it was SportsEngine, and we had this momentum in team sports and youth sports. And then we thought, well, all right, well, engine, okay, that sounds like a good idea too. And so, you know, you make a couple of sales to businesses now, and they're wondering why there's all this sports-specific terminology in their website. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, we absolutely created this mess. So we wasted so much time just going off and chasing things when, you know, at that point in time, we had maybe 1, 2, 3% market penetration. And if we would have just doubled down in our core and just, you know, focused everything we had there, oh man, that would have, you know, sped things up by a year or more. Who knows?
So I think,
Is there one more question allowed?
absolutely.
So that makes me interested. So, okay, so you guys had each other as founders to
Yeah.
get each other through the hard and the good times. But what was it that held you accountable? Because I can't imagine that you guys were on the perfect schedule so that you guys could say, hey, okay, so it's your turn to, you know, watch me do my thing and make sure that I'm doing this, meeting this deadline, or doing this due date, or focusing on this project or whatever. So what helped keep you accountable?
I think we all kept each other accountable. Man, I mean, the last thing that I would ever want to do would be let those guys down. Like if there was something that needed to be done in the areas that were kind of my specialty, like anything that had to do with design or marketing or product design or front-end development early on. If it fell down, it was on nobody but me, you know, and that's the last thing I wanted in front of those guys. And so, I mean, we all had that mentality that we were just horrified of letting the other people down. And I mean, that was enough to just keep us all really pointed towards the good of the organization. And again, so fortunate to have founders that put the emphasis on that and not themselves. I think that if you have a team, you know, it's cliche, but it is so true. If you have a team that is looking towards the good of the organization and profoundly believes that, and their actions back that up, oh, that's so powerful.
I think this is really quick, if that's okay.
Of course.
So again, congrats on the NBC thing. When they acquired, or when that deal panned out, were they like, okay, we love you guys, but we need a name at an S&E, or how did that play out?
Yeah.
With the name
Right, spelling of SportsEngine. It's funny because people have been saying SportsEngine for like the last half dozen years, and now we're finally, yeah, it turns out they were right. So we've been talking about doing that for a couple of years. When we first named the product and then the company, we knew we wanted a short domain name, and NGIN was available, and we're like, all right, we can put sport.engine.com, and that'll fly, you know. We can teach people how to say it, and, you know, meanwhile, over the years, tens of thousands of conversations and so much time has been wasted with us just trying to explain the name and how it's spelled before you even get to the value prop of what you're creating. Mistakes. That's another one. Yeah. And so.
Like the Facebook to Facebook.
Yeah. And so, but there was never a good time to do it. Again, you're in startup mode, limited resources, limited time. It wasn't a priority. There were so many other things that fell above that. And then now with NBC Sports and the timing of that, it was like, if we're going to do this, now is the time. And it gave us a chance to revisit the logo as well. And we felt strongly that we wanted to incorporate the peacock because of all the things that the NBC Sports brand stands for. We wanted to address the spelling. We had owned the domain name for a couple of years as well, so that was there waiting. And it was just the perfect time. I mean, there'd be nothing worse than advertising during the Olympics or the Super Bowl and people sitting there looking at their television wondering what the heck that is, And to just be obvious about it is so essential for our success going forward.
Okay. Well, I think this is the end of our session. Once again, thank you very much for investing your time. Carson, thank you very much. And tell your
My
wife
pleasure.
thank you.
Yeah.